Hi everybody, Andrew Hutchinson here, and today I'm super excited because this is going to be my first set of book reviews for this channel, The Book Hutch. I base a lot of my reviews for books also on what I rate them on my Goodreads, which you can go and follow me on my Goodreads. It's just Andrew Hutchinson if you want to see what I'm reading or what I've rated other books as well. So obviously, I am a librarian, and at my library job, I'm not only surrounded by lots of books, I love to read lots of books, but also sometimes I'm involved with book clubs and we are required to read certain things, which is why I'm starting my first set of reviews in the mystery thriller genre. These books are kind of a blend of both, at least all but one that I'm going to review today. And this normally isn't my first genre of choice when I go to pick something off of my own library shelves, but because I've had to read these books for this book club, I thought, why not spend this time to share my thoughts about them with all of you? Now, for this book club, we have read 3 of the 5 books on this list. The only reason we did not read 2 of them is because there's not someone who dies in the beginning, and normally for the club they have a rule that there has to be a dead body, as dark as that sounds, in order to keep reading. And so that is the only reason why I have not brought these other 2 books that I will talk about to the club, but we've read 3 to the 5. I have read all 5, and so therefore that's why I still wanted to talk about these books with all of you. So let's just go ahead and dive right in. The first book I want to talk about, and I'm putting the covers here so you can see them, is The Woman in the Window by A.J. Finn. Now, this book has a lot of controversy to it, especially because of the author. There's been allegations made that the author lied in his past about having cancer, and also that he may have stolen parts of the plot of this book from another author. I knew that going into this when my mystery club read it, but I still decided to set that aside and just read the book as it was for the premise of its mystery. It's about a woman named Dr. Anna Fox who lives alone in her apartment. She has agoraphobia. She's terrified to go outside, so she spends her time drinking lots of wine and watching what her neighbors do. And I definitely empathized with her. I enjoyed her as a protagonist, and I definitely enjoy having that emotional connection with characters, so that was a big plus. But at some point, Anna looks across the street and sees something very terrifying happen in her neighbor's apartment, and then it kind of just unfolds from there. I gave this book 2.5 out of 5 stars, and the reason that I did that is because it took over 100 pages to get to the actual instigating incident, and in my opinion, that is way too long to keep a reader waiting about what's going to happen in a mystery novel. We spent those 100 pages getting to know Anna really well, which is great, but I'm shocked an editor allowed this author to do that, because normally in a mystery novel you have the incident, someone dies, or you see something that makes the mystery intriguing, the reader is suddenly pulled in, and then you start revealing things about the character as you go so that the reader can connect with them more. That didn't happen in this book. It was a lot of just getting to know the character for a very long time before anything interesting happened. Once it finally did, it was engaging and it kept me going until the end. There's some twists and turns. The ending is like an action film. Speaking of the film that's going to come out soon, I cannot wait to see Amy Adams in this role. I think she's going to do great with it. And I'm hoping in the film they make the incident that starts it all happen a little earlier for the audience. But ultimately, that's why I rated it so low, and that was the consensus among my book club. It just took way too long. I still recommend reading it, especially if you're like me, and if there's a big blockbuster movie coming out, you like to read the book that it's based on first to compare. That's just who I am. But otherwise, it's an interesting time to read it. So I would say go ahead and go for it. I just would be interested to see if anyone rates it higher than I did for any reasons. And maybe you're not going to be bugged by the fact that it took so long. Maybe you'll like to get to know Anna in the beginning a lot. But that's just why I rated it 2.5 out of 5. Okay, my next book is The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. And this was a very enjoyable read. It was very interesting. The premise is about a woman named Alicia. She is an artist, and she is discovered one night with her dead husband who has been shot to death, and she is locked up in a psych ward, and she never speaks another word again. This plays off of some Greek stories that are very, very old and ties that into a modern day tale of a woman who you don't know whether or not she killed her husband. And that premise it was good enough for me to pick it up after I had been recommended it a couple times by some other library patrons who come in quite frequently. I had the group read it. And the consensus was overall pretty lukewarm, but still good. I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. I enjoyed the premise greatly. I enjoyed the character of Alicia, even though she doesn't talk. And it was one that if I was having to take out the trash or take the dog for a walk, I kept wanting to go back and pick it up. I really didn't want to put it down. And the only reason it didn't get a higher rating for me is the ending. Though I think there's a big twist at the ending that's very engaging for readers, I was a little bit let down by it. I sort of felt like when you finally learned what happened and why, I just realized that all of it could have been avoided very easily. And so I know we're supposed to suspend our judgments, beliefs, especially when it comes to mystery fiction, because some pretty crazy stuff can happen. But in this instance, I just felt like the pieces didn't quite fit together at the end to be fully satisfactory. And also, when it ends, it just ends. We're done. And I also, in mystery novels, I like a little more of the ending to be further explanation of what happens to the characters after all of the trauma they have endured has pretty much come to a close, or at least the incidents that bring those traumas. I don't necessarily need an epilogue that's super long. I don't need another 10 chapters, but when books just solve the crime and then it's over, I'm left wanting more. And so I felt that with this book personally. But I absolutely recommend it for anyone who likes a good thriller and will just have you waiting to find out until the very end of what happened. And maybe you'll find the ending a little bit more satisfactory than I did, but that's just what I thought about it. The next book that I want to talk about is No Exit by Taylor Adams. This book was wild, and I had such a fun time with reading it. What was really cool is that I live in Colorado, and I read it in the winter while it was snowing, and it takes place in Colorado in the winter while it's snowing, though it's terrifying. So it's about a college girl named Darby who is going, I believe, from the Boulder area north of Denver to Salt Lake City in Utah, if I'm not mistaken. And she's going to see her mom who's dying of cancer. And she's on her way there when she gets trapped in a snowstorm at a rest stop with no way out. And there's an interesting crew of characters that are also trapped in the rest stop with her. She goes outside at one point and she looks in someone's van and she sees a young girl in a cage, alive, trapped. And it just goes from there. And as soon as I read that premise, I knew I would have a super engaging time reading it, which I did. I did not want to put it down from the moment I started the first page. I started actually reading it at work because a patron checked it in. And so I started reading it under the table whenever someone wasn't checking in or out. And luckily it was a slow shift. So I just kept reading and reading. And then I went home and sat down and read, and I couldn't go to bed until I'd finished it. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. The reason it didn't get a little bit higher is that I loved the main character, Darby. I really, really identified with her. I remember what it was like to be in college, running off of nothing but caffeine and a dream, and basically wanting to get home to see her family. I also recently lost my mom last year, and so the fact that she's losing hers made me identify with her even more and empathize. But ultimately, my biggest grievance with the book is that she goes through so much until the very, very end. And I would suffice to call it semblance of torture. I mean, the author really dragged his protagonist through a lot of trials. And though I know that's an important piece of a story because it makes us continuously hope that the protagonist gets out of the situation, I just couldn't wait to get to the end because I was so tired of reading about her getting beat up. And she never had a win. It was like anytime she ever did something where you're like, oh, good, immediately it was taken from her. And so I've had that with TV shows too, where I can't keep watching if a main character never gets a break or never gets even a little victory. And so she doesn't get many of those as the story goes on. And so that was my only qualm with it. I wanted to see her beat up just a little bit less. And I'm not a prude when it comes to gore or anything like that. If it's part of the story, it's part of the story. But I wanted to put it down for her sake and have it all wrap up. I did enjoy that once you explore why the girl was in the van, there's a big social issue that is brought up and it's raising a lot of awareness. And so I love that in novels where there's a mystery premise and the plot is all one thing to keep a reader going, but then it's also about something much bigger that's going on in modern society right now. And so I'm happy that the author did that. And so anybody who lives in Colorado, I definitely recommend reading this book, but even if you don't, I think you're going to have a great time reading it. But again, buckle up when you start. All right, the next book I'm going to talk about is called Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. This is my highest rated of the bunch. When I went into this, I had not read Riley Sager's books before. I haven't read any of his other ones yet, though I plan to. I know he also wrote under his original name, and then this is a pseudonym that he writes more mysteries and thrillers with. I think I found out about this book from a booktuber, Kat, who's Paperback Dreams. And so I heard the premise and was really intrigued. It's about another young girl named Jules out of college, and her boyfriend breaks up with her. She's in need of cash, and she sees an ad to go watch this really lavish apartment while the owners are out of town. And it's in this famous building in New York called Bartholomew, at this Gothic style building with gargoyles and all sorts of stuff decorating the outside. And so she goes to see the apartment. She keeps going, okay, this is too good to be true. I just get paid to watch this apartment. What's the catch? And the lady showing it to her says, the only thing is you can't ever bring anyone in here. You have to be in here alone. And that raises some alarms with her, and especially her friends, but she just needs the money. So she takes the job. She meets another young girl who's doing the same thing as she is. And the other girl said, there's some weird stuff going on in this building. And then that girl suddenly disappears. And so Jules has to figure out why. It's a lot like No Exit. It's a wild ride from start to finish. And when we get to the end, there's a big social issue that's brought up. And as terrifying as it is, once you find out what is going on in this building, I would not be shocked if one day I opened a newspaper and read a story about what if something was actually happening that was the same as what's going on in this book. And so that's why I loved it. I felt like it's believable, even though it's a little bit out there. And the reason, especially why I rated it 4.5, is I loved the main character, Jules. I identified with her so much, especially as a millennial, because I am a millennial. And I felt like this author perfectly captured what it feels like to where when you're out of college and you're in debt, you don't quite know what you want to do with your life. You just had a relationship fall apart and you're low on money and you don't have a lot of direction and you're just going to start looking for whatever job you can get. I have had those times in my life where I have saying, okay, I'm a little bit low on cash. What can I do? Can I go clean someone's apartment? Can I watch someone's pets? You start resorting to what skills do I have? What's an easy job I can get? And that's why I identified with her so much. And so I really empathized with her through the whole way. I felt he wrote this book wonderfully. And so I highly recommend the book Lock Every Door by Riley Sager. I think you'll not be disappointed. At the same time, I know my own biases. I know I might be overhyping this book as well, which has been done to me in the past, but I just absolutely love that book. The last book I'm going to talk about is breaking from the thriller theme that we've seen the last 4 books have, and it's Where the Crawdads Sing by Delia Owens. This also isn't a 100% conventional mystery novel, though there's mystery elements to it. It's about a young girl named Kaya who lives in basically a rundown shack in the marshes of the Outer Banks of North Carolina in the 1960s. And her family is a hot mess. Her mom leaves. Her dad's an alcoholic. Her older siblings eventually also leave her. And eventually she's left all alone to fend for herself. She tries going to school. It does not work out well. So she basically has to raise herself, although she does get help from a boy in town to get educated, as well as some financial help from a few other people in town as well. There's very interesting characters in it. I like the historical context a lot. The biggest thing this novel has going for it, which is just amazing, is the author Delia Owens was a renowned, I believe, zoologist, wrote about animals, has a couple nonfiction books out there, and her love of nature just seeps through every page. And she writes so beautifully. And just those passages just took my breath away when she wrote about the marsh and what it looked like and all of the birds and the animals involved. And that's alone worth reading this book. What I didn't enjoy about the book, which is why I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, is I could not emotionally connect with Kaya, the main character. It's interesting because sometimes I can be a bit detached emotionally and a little bit cold-hearted when it comes to reading books and identifying with certain characters. And I felt like Kaya's the same way, but for some reason that didn't make me connect with her. It made me distance from her. I felt she was a little bit detached. Granted, she's been through what more than most people have in terms of characters, even fictional. And so I can give her a lot of credit for being away from humanity. It's just, I could not super identify with her. And when we read this for my book club, people were in the room crying about how much they loved her. And I thought that was amazing. I just didn't feel the same way. Also, in terms of the mystery is that a local boy gets killed and Kaya is the main suspect. The sheriff basically says, I think you did it. They lock her up. There's a trial. And it's a lot of it is based in their prejudice. The only issue is, as I read the book, I only had one suspect in mind, and I turned out to be right. And I felt like there were no major distractions. In most mystery novels, the author tries to make you think it could be this person, and now maybe it could be this person. There was really none of that. I only thought one person probably did it, and on the last page, it is revealed who actually did and committed this murder. And so, let that be what it is. I still feel like it is worth people reading. It was the most read book in the country in 2019. I'm so happy for Delia Owens. I will definitely read whatever she writes again. I just found myself in more of a minority where most people I know and I've seen on Goodreads have just been blown away by this novel. And I just didn't left feeling that way. The first 2/3 were enjoyable. It's only really when we got into the courtroom and we really got to see Almost to Kill a Mockingbird style where people were really defending Kaya and we got to see the litigation back and forth and you really felt like someone finally was rooting for her. That's when I became super engaged, but by then the book was almost already over. So anyway, I gave that 3 out of 5, but I'm sure if you're watching this, I'm sure you'll like it more than me. And so definitely pick it up and give it a chance. So those are the 5 novels that I wanted to go over today. I hope that they maybe gave you some new ideas about what to read. Even if you're not a mystery or thriller novel, I hope at least one of these stuck out to you. I definitely think giving any one of them a chance is worth it. And just broadening horizons in terms of what we read, I think is always healthy. And so, again, you can follow me on my Goodreads if you want at Andrew Hutchinson, and I will continue doing book reviews on this channel in various genres to share my ideas out there if anyone is interested in hearing them. And so I look to do more book reviews in the future. And also feel free to give this video a thumbs up and comment down below if you have differing thoughts about any of the novels that I just mentioned, whether you completely disagree with me or whether you completely agree with me. I'm open to anything and everything. So that's what all of this is about, on sharing our ideas on the internet. All right, well, until then, or until later, guys, I'll see you later. Bye.